Picture this: a 5-year-old boy, barely tall enough to see over the other kids on the pitch, standing nervously at his very first football trial. The coach looks at him once and shakes his head. Too small. But his grandmother, standing at the edge of that pitch, refuses to leave until he gets a chance. Eventually, the coach changes his mind. Years later, every goal he scores ends the same way, pointing toward the sky. That gesture has never changed. It's always been for the same person, his grandmother. This is the story of Lionel Messi, June 24th, 1987. In Rosario, Argentina, a baby boy was born. Nobody in that hospital room could have known what was coming. His father worked long shifts at a steel factory. His mother cleaned houses part-time. Money was tight. But there was one thing in that house that never ran out: a football, bouncing off walls, rolling under furniture, never far from a small boy's feet. He was the third of 4 children, and from the moment he could stand, he was chasing that ball. His father used to joke that it was tied to his son's ankle by an invisible string. At 5, he joined a tiny local club called Grandoli. His own father coached the team. By 8, he'd already outgrown it, moving up to Newell's Old Boys, one of the biggest academies in the city. Here's the thing, though. He was small, smaller than every single boy on that pitch. The other kids gave him a nickname, La Pulga, the flea. But here's what they quickly learned: fleas are impossible to catch. The moment the ball touched his feet, something happened that nobody could quite explain. The bigger boys lunged and missed. The faster boys chased and fell behind. It was as if the game slowed down for him, while it sped up for everyone else. His youth team went on an unbeaten streak so long, so absurd, that coaches around Rosario started calling them the Machine of '87, a nickname for an entire generation of players, built around one impossibly gifted kid in the middle of it. By 11 years old, he was already credited with somewhere close to 500 goals across various youth tournaments, a number that sounds made up, until you understand exactly how thoroughly he was dominating every single match he played. And then, just as the whispers about this kid started spreading beyond Rosario, there were health issues too, quietly building for years before anyone outside his family knew. By age 9, he had simply stopped growing. His parents noticed first, then, over the next year, doctors ran test after test trying to understand why. At 11, they finally had an answer. The condition was called growth hormone deficiency. His body simply wasn't making enough of the hormone he needed to grow. Without treatment, doctors warned, he might never grow past 4 feet 7 inches. The treatment existed. It worked. But it came with a brutal price tag, close to $1,000 every single month. For a steel factory worker's family in 1990s Argentina, that number might as well have been $1 million. The injections started right away, with his parents by his side, helping administer each shot. By 12, that changed. He began handling the injections entirely on his own, measuring the dose, finding a fresh spot on his leg, giving himself the shot each night before bed. His parents were still nearby, but this part he'd learned to do himself. Long before any trophy, before any headline, before the world knew his name, this was the real beginning. A child learning that even his gift would demand a price. His hometown club, Newell's Old Boys, tried to help cover part of the cost. For a while, it worked. Then that support quietly dried up. River Plate, one of the 2 biggest clubs in the entire country, looked at the situation, looked at the cost, and decided the risk wasn't worth it. They walked away, door after door, closing on a boy who hadn't even finished growing yet. For 2 years, his family searched desperately, writing letters, making calls, requesting help from anyone in Argentine football willing to pay for his treatment. Nobody said yes. Then, in the year 2000, a phone call arrived from the other side of the ocean. A club in Spain, FC Barcelona, had heard about the kid from Rosario. They wanted to see him for themselves. Nobody in that small house had any idea that one phone call was about to change absolutely everything. The phone call led to an invitation. Come to Spain and show us what you can do. The whole family made the trip together. His father Jorge, his mother Celia, and all three of his siblings. The trial in Barcelona lasted only a few minutes. That's all it took. The club's sporting director, a man named Carles Rexach, watched this 13-year-old kid touch the ball a handful of times. He turned to the people next to him and said just 2 words. Sign him. But there was a problem. The Barcelona board wasn't convinced. The boy was small. He needed expensive medical treatment. To them, it looked risky. Weeks dragged on. The family sat in a hotel room in Spain, waiting for an answer that never came. His father, Jorge, running out of patience, threatened to just take his son home. So Rexach did something nobody expected. He met Jorge for lunch, no contract in hand, nothing prepared. He asked a waiter for something to write on. The waiter handed him a paper napkin. Right there, at that table, Rexach wrote a few short lines on it. He signed his name. One of the most important deals in football history happened on a napkin somebody could have used to wipe their mouth. Barcelona agreed to pay for the treatment. The whole family made the move to Spain together, ready to start a new life. It didn't last long. Settling an entire family of 6 into a new country, a new language, a new life. It proved too much. Before long, his mother and 3 siblings returned to Rosario. Only Jorge stayed behind with his son. He trained at La Masia, Barcelona's legendary academy, but he never actually lived there. While most young players stayed in the academy's dormitories, he lived instead with his father in a small flat near the stadium. It didn't make things any easier. He didn't speak Catalan. He was very quiet around his new teammates. So quiet, some of them genuinely thought he was mute. At night, in that flat, he'd often cry, thinking about home, his mother's cooking, his siblings arguing down the hall, everything he'd left behind. Talent had gotten him through the door. It would take something much harder to get him through what came next. Then, on May 1st, 2005, everything changed in a single moment. He was 17. Barcelona was playing a team called Albacete at Camp Nou. He came on as a substitute. A few minutes later, the ball found its way to Ronaldinho, at the time the reigning World Player of the Year and Barcelona's biggest star. Ronaldinho lifted a soft pass over the defense. The teenager didn't even break stride. He chipped it over the goalkeeper with his left foot. Goal! Ronaldinho picked him up and carried him on his shoulders around the pitch. The crowd had no idea what they were actually watching. How could they? It was just one goal, from a kid nobody had heard of yet. It was goal number 1. There would be hundreds more. What happened over the next several years is honestly hard to believe, even watching it happen. By 2009, under a new coach named Pep Guardiola, Barcelona completely redesigned how they played, and they built it entirely around him. Here's the thing about this kid. He was overwhelmingly left-footed. Almost every dangerous thing he did on a football pitch happened off that one foot. So instead of treating that as a limitation, Guardiola built the whole team's shape around it. Get the ball to his left foot, again and again, and let him do the rest. It worked better than anyone could have imagined. That season, Barcelona won every single trophy available to them. 6 trophies. 1 year. A club had never done that before. At the end of that same year, he won his first Ballon d'Or, the award given to the best player in the world. Then he won it again the next year, and the year after that, and the year after that. 4 in a row. Nobody had ever done that either. Remember that small boy from the clinic, the one doctors said might never grow tall enough to play? He was now, officially, the best footballer alive. But the strangest part of this stretch was still coming. In 2012, one single calendar year, he scored 91 goals. 91. Sit with that number for a second. That's not across a career. That's 12 months. The previous record had stood for 40 years, set by a German striker who scored 85. This kid didn't just break the record, he blew right past it. By now, he had every individual honor the sport could offer, every record that mattered at the club level. And yet, one thing was still missing, the one thing no trophy with Barcelona could ever give him. It wasn't in Spain. It was back home, but none of that mattered back home in Argentina, because Argentina hadn't won a World Cup since 1986, a full year before he was even born. Every 4 years, the whole country hoped this would finally be the year. And every 4 years, somehow, it wasn't. In 2014, Argentina made it all the way to the World Cup final. He had been their standout player throughout, carrying much of the attacking weight. The final, against Germany, stayed scoreless deep into extra time, until Germany finally scored, and it was over, 1-0. That night, he was handed the award for best player of the entire tournament. It should have been a proud moment. Instead, he barely reacted, visibly disappointed, going through the motions. It wasn't the trophy he'd come for. Here's a question that followed him everywhere for years, in every interview, every headline. How could someone this brilliant never win the one thing his own country actually cared about? Some of that pressure came from comparisons to Diego Maradona, the man who had led Argentina to their last World Cup title back in 1986. Maradona sometimes questioned his leadership, once saying, "He's a great person, but he doesn't have the personality to be a leader." Other times he defended him just as strongly, calling him the best in the world. It was a complicated relationship, respect and criticism, both at once. The comparisons never stopped, especially after 2007, when this same kid scored a solo goal against a team called Getafe, running from his own half, past nearly every defender, and finishing calmly. It looked almost identical to Maradona's most famous goal ever, the one against England in 1986. On November 25, 2020, Maradona passed away. He was 60 years old. Messi posted a short tribute. A very sad day for all Argentines and for football. 2 years later, he was about to do something even Maradona himself once doubted he ever could. First, though, things got worse before they got better. 2016 brought another crushing final, the Copa America, against Chile, decided by penalties. He stepped up to take the very first kick for Argentina. He almost never missed penalties. This time, he did. The ball sailed high over the crossbar, into the night sky above the stadium. Argentina lost. He sat down on the grass, alone, shoulders shaking. At a press conference after the match, he told reporters something nobody expected. "For me, the national team is over. I've done all I can." He retired, 29 years old and done with Argentina for good, or so it seemed. The whole country panicked. Fans pleaded with him on television. Even the president of Argentina called and asked him to reconsider. 6 weeks later, he changed his mind and came back. Around the same time, another part of his life was quietly falling into place. There was a girl he'd known back in Rosario, Antonella Rocuzzo. They'd reconnected years earlier, in 2005. Their first son, Tiago, arrived in 2012, then Matteo in 2015, and a third son, Kiro, would follow soon after in 2018. In June 2017, they finally got married, back home in Rosario, surrounded by 260 guests. Whatever pressure came with being the best player alive, at home, he was simply dad. Football, though, wasn't done testing him yet. In 2018, Argentina crashed out of the World Cup in the round of 16, losing 4-3 to France. He was 31 now, and people had started to genuinely wonder if this was simply never going to happen for him. Then, in the summer of 2021, something else broke, something that had nothing to do with the national team at all. After more than 20 years at Barcelona, the only club he'd ever really known as an adult, the club announced he wasn't staying. Their finances had completely collapsed. He'd even offered to take a massive pay cut just to make it work. It didn't matter. The math simply didn't add up anymore. At the press conference, he sat down in front of the cameras to explain. He didn't get very far. The tears came before the words did. He had to stop more than once just to keep talking. He'd arrived in Barcelona as a 13-year-old boy with a needle and a napkin contract. He was leaving as a 34-year-old man who'd given the club almost his entire adult life. He signed with Paris Saint-Germain days later. For the first time in his career, he wore a jersey that wasn't Barcelona's. His 2 seasons in Paris were successful, statistically, but it never quite felt right. PSG's fans, notoriously hard to please, booed him more than once, even while he kept scoring, kept setting up goals for his teammates. For a player who'd been adored almost everywhere else his entire career, it was a strange, uncomfortable kind of struggle. That same year, though, 2021, brought something nobody saw coming. Argentina reached the Copa America final again. This time, the tournament was being played inside Brazil, Argentina's biggest rival, on their own home turf. And the final itself was against Brazil. In the 22nd minute, a teammate scored. Argentina held on and won, 1-0, in Brazil's own stadium, in front of Brazil's own fans. For the first time in 28 years, Argentina had a major trophy. He dropped to his knees on the grass and wept. But one tournament still remained, the one that had always mattered most. That tournament was the FIFA World Cup. And in November 2022, it finally arrived, in Qatar. Argentina made it through the group stage, then the knockout rounds, growing stronger with every match. By mid-December, they'd fought their way all the way to the final. December 18th, 2022, the World Cup final. Argentina against France. And on the other side of the pitch stood his own club teammate from Paris Saint-Germain, a rising young star named Kylian Mbappé. For most of the match, Argentina was in complete control. He scored a penalty in the first half. A teammate added a second. By the 80th minute, Argentina led 2-0. France looked finished. Then, in less than 2 minutes, Mbappé scored twice. 2-2. The match went to extra time. He scored again. 3-2. Argentina was minutes away from the trophy. Mbappé scored a third. 3-3. Penalties would decide it. He walked up to take Argentina's first kick. Years earlier, on a different continent, he'd missed one just like this. He struck it clean. It hit the back of the net. Argentina won. He dropped to his knees, looked up at the sky, held his arms out wide and cried. 36 years had passed since Maradona lifted that same trophy, back in 1986. Almost exactly one generation. Now it was his turn. They draped a traditional black robe over his shoulders for the ceremony, a nod to Qatar's own customs. He held the trophy above his head. He kissed it. He wouldn't let it go. The boy once told he was too small to make it had become, officially, a world champion. Step back for a second and look at what this whole career actually adds up to. 8 Ballon d'Ors, more than anyone in the sport's history. Hundreds of career goals for club and country combined. In 2012 alone, he scored 91 goals in a single year, a record nobody has come remotely close to since. More than 46 major trophies, making him, statistically, the most decorated football player who has ever lived. But fame, it turns out, comes with dangers most people never see. In March 2023, just months after that World Cup win, Two men rode up to a supermarket in Rosario on a motorbike. The store belonged to his wife's family. They fired 14 bullets into the front of the building. Nobody was hurt. But before they left, they dropped a note on the ground. "Messi, we're waiting for you." His own hometown, the city that had celebrated him like a hero just months earlier, had turned into a place where he wasn't fully safe. He never spoke about it publicly, but he never stopped returning either. The very same year, he made a decision that surprised almost everyone. He signed with Inter Miami in the United States, a league still growing its global reputation. Many assumed it was basically a retirement move. They were wrong. He won a trophy in his very first tournament with the club, scoring a dramatic late free kick to seal it. He went on to win the league's Most Valuable Player award 2 seasons running, the first player in the league's history to do that. Then, on March 18, 2026, in a match against Nashville, something happened that only one other player in the history of the sport had ever reached. He scored his 900th career goal, 900. Sit with that number for a second. A small boy from Rosario, once told his body might never let him play professionally at all, had put a ball into a net 900 separate times across more than 2 decades. He joined Cristiano Ronaldo, who'd crossed the same mark about a year and a half earlier. 2 completely different careers, same impossible number. There was no big celebration, just a quiet jog back to the center circle, like he'd done 1,000 times before. And then came 2026 itself, his 6th World Cup, a number no outfield player his age had ever attempted before. He was 38 years old. There was nothing left he needed to prove. He played it anyway. He led Argentina all the way back to a World Cup final for the 2nd tournament in a row. Waiting for them, Spain, and a remarkable 19-year-old winger named Lamine Yamal. This time, the story didn't end the way it had in Qatar. Spain won, 1-0 in extra time. But what happened after the final whistle said more about this man than any trophy ever could. As Spain celebrated their win, the Argentine section of the stadium started chanting his name. "Messi! Messi!" Not out of anger, not out of disappointment, out of pure gratitude. Then, as the tears came, a new chant rose up. "Don't cry," they sang to him. He waited until Spain lifted the trophy. Then he walked off a World Cup pitch, 39 years old now, for what might be the last time in his career. Not as a champion this time, but loved exactly the same as he'd always been. Every single time he still points to the sky after a goal. It's the same person he's been honoring since he was 10 years old. He was told he was too small. His own body worked against him for years. He left the only club he'd ever known, in tears, in front of the entire world. His own hometown once threatened his life, and for over a decade, an entire nation wondered if he'd ever win the one thing that mattered most to them. He answered every single doubt, not despite everything he went through, but because of it. If this story moved you, subscribe. More football stories like this one are coming. See you in the next one.